Hello and welcome to the Stormont Sources podcast, where we take you inside politics at Stormont and inside policymaking for Northern Ireland. I'm David McCann, and also on the podcast is Tim Kearns, former special advisor to Peter Robinson and head of policy for the DUP. Hello, Tim.
Hello, David, and preemptively, hello, Michael.
And we also have Michael McKernan, who was former special advisor to the SDLP. He worked in the executive from 2007 to 2016. Hello, Michael.
Hello, David, and hello, Tim.
On the podcast today, we are talking about Donald Trump's state visit. The President is visiting with the royal family and the Prime Minister, but the Northern Ireland First Minister, Michelle O'Neill, will not be there. We are asking, should she be attending with the Deputy First Minister, or is she right to boycott? Then, the DUP conference is this weekend. With a mini reshuffle this week, we are debating what Gavin Robinson needs to do this week to have a successful conference. And we're looking at, can the DUP be rescued from its poor polling position? And what is the Robinson DUP anyway? And finally, we're talking about Derry. Are they being left behind? Over the past week, decisions made around football funding and the resignation of businessman Kieran Kennedy from the board of Invest NI, alleging discrimination against the region. We are asking about the future of the Northwest and whether Stormont is delivering for it. All that and more coming up on this episode of Stormont Sources. You can watch the conversation on YouTube. Search for Stormont Sources, where we upload clips and full episodes for you to enjoy. Head to YouTube, subscribe to our channel for videos and updates. You can also follow us on X, watch clips on TikTok and Instagram, and subscribe to our mailing list at stormontsources.com. You can also leave us a review on your podcast app. Just remember to make it a good one. You can drop us a WhatsApp on 0333 404 6507. Just remember to use the word Stormont. You can also send us an email, hello@stormontsources.com. Our first topic, US President Donald Trump is completing his second state visit to the UK. The Deputy First Minister Emma Little-Pengelly will be there, but the First Minister Michelle O'Neill is staying here. This has caused some division at the top of the executive. Now, when she was asked about this, about whether Michelle O'Neill staying away was a mistake, the Deputy First Minister Emma Little-Pengelly responded, and I quote, "Yes, I think it's a mistake because this is an opportunity for Northern Ireland to have their voice heard." Now, Michelle O'Neill has said that she was, quote unquote, very comfortable with her decision, stating her opposition to the war in Gaza, which she called the biggest humanitarian crisis of our time, being the rationale for why she is staying away from the US President. So we're asking, are Sinn Féin right to continue with their boycott? Of course, they stayed away from Washington back in March. Michael, is Michelle O'Neill right?
Well, this argument came up before in relation to the participating in the White House events back in March. It's the same principle. Everyone has pretty much agreed that Donald Trump is an appalling individual. You know, he's a serial liar. He has no problem inciting racial disagreement and disharmony anywhere he goes, and he has a massive ego, and he's the most dislikable person. But the argument goes, and also he is uniquely possibly the only person who can maybe move Israel on the Gaza conflict and get them to put the end to this totally outrageous slaughter they're engaged in. So that does make him a bit different. But the two schools of thought are, he's an appalling individual, stay away from him. He's doing nothing but support Israel, stay away from him. Or others who say, forget the man, forget how appalling he is. He's the President of the United States. He's been democratically elected. He wields huge power throughout the world. And if you're interested in the future of any of these major issues, including Northern Ireland itself, but Gaza or any of the other issues around the world, then build a relationship with Trump and see can you get some influence. The UK government, Keir Starmer, has decided he will follow the latter course, and he will try and build a relationship with Trump that will help the UK economy and help moderate Trump's position on some of these issues around the world. So back locally, I do not fault Emma Little-Pengelly for going, and I don't fault Michelle O'Neill for not going. I don't think it matters a whole lot at the end. It's a dinner. Probably wouldn't meet Trump, probably wouldn't even get a photograph of Trump if they wanted it. Might meet some people in the margins worth talking to. So Emma has an argument there that it's always worth going and seeing who you bump into. And Michelle has the argument. Gaza is unique. There are actually bigger conflicts going on in the world than Gaza. But Gaza is unique in that death is raining down on an innocent and defenseless population. We're targeting children and the use of starvation are tactics in their military strategy. That makes it different from anywhere else. But I have to say the body count in other conflicts is much greater. In Sudan, Darfur, it's atrocious, and there's allegations of genocide in Darfur, and also elsewhere in the world. The Ukraine Russia conflict, the body count is 20 times what it is in the Gaza Strip. So we can all beat ourselves up, and if I can add on to that, while I absolutely abhor what the Israelis are doing in Gaza, I think there's nearly a mini industry developing, and who can beat their breasts most about it, and who can tell us what coffee to drink and where to go shopping and all the rest of it. I send these people who are just getting a little too zealous for my liking, I send them off by asking them, well, who could I make a donation to? Because it's clear you care a lot about this, and presumably you're giving money to the right people. So who do I give a donation to? That usually closes it off for a few minutes.
Okay, well, so you're not a BDS fan then, Michael. Timothy, I'm guessing you are going to side with the Deputy First Minister over the First Minister on this. Prove me wrong, or am I right?
I'm tempted to say no notes. Let's move to topic 2. I think Michael's encapsulated it all perfectly. That's precisely how I feel on the whole thing. Go, don't go, who cares? This is much more about Northern Ireland media trying to make a story where... I don't blame them for that. I'm not blaming the journalists at all. Of course there's a story here. One's going and one's not going. Of course there's a story in that. But it's much more of an inside the beltway thing. This Donald Trump will not care one jot that Michelle O'Neill's there, and he'll probably not care terribly much that Emma Little-Pengelly is there. I probably slightly disagree with Michael in terms of there probably will be an opportunity for a very brief interaction between Emma and Donald Trump, and I'm no doubt we'll see the official picture later that she'll post on her social media. On balance, look, it's probably better to go than not to go, because if you're looking at this from a diplomatic perspective, people notice an absence much more greatly than they notice your presence, because an absence really says something. If you're trying to court America for investment, for all of these other things that we would like to see flowing our way from America, I think it's probably better to be there. And the other thing I would say is, look, Donald Trump, as reprehensible as he is, he's the last guy that was in the office was following exactly the same policy on Israel. So if your objection's Israel and Gaza, well, you're prepared to meet the last guy. Why were you prepared to meet him when he was following no different policy? If Kamala Harris had won the election, she'd be pretty much following exactly the same foreign policy as Donald Trump is, and Michelle O'Neill would be at that. So a reason for not being there is nothing to do with Gaza and Israel. It's to do with the fact that she feels this plays better to her base.
Yeah.
And I think if you want to be First Minister for all, you should go. And look, I just absolutely echo and attach myself fully to what Michael said about Gaza and Israel. There's an appalling slaughter going on there, and we need to stand up against that.
Okay, now there is obviously the juxtaposition between obviously John Swinney, who has met with Donald Trump. Obviously, he was in Washington 2 weeks ago and met with the US president, pressed him about whiskey tariffs, and again has made a point of engaging with the president. That's a bit of a risk for him because, of course, there is a pro-Gaza sentiment, very heavy pro-Gaza sentiment within the SNP. Michelle O'Neill, of course, is taking a totally different approach. I mean, is there a danger here, Michael, because we were talking earlier this year about how Emma Pengelly kind of was stealing the headlines over the Programme for Government and stealing the headlines over the US St. Patrick's Day visit. Is there a danger Emma could do this again to Michelle O'Neill?
Well, I don't know, because I just don't think it's important enough. But I was chatting to a leading Sinn Féin supporter in Lurgan last night, and he was appalled at the idea that Michelle would go. He said it would really anger a lot of people, a lot of Sinn Féin supporters, if she were to go. And I put the point to him, well, yes, but they're still going to vote for her. They're still going to vote Sinn Féin. So maybe there's an electoral argument for Michelle actually going and seeing can she siphon off a few more middle-of-the-road nationalists, SDLP types, and put up with a bit of opprobrium from her own supporters. But I think Sinn Féin has attached themselves to the Gaza issue so emphatically and completely, both north and south, that she didn't really have any room for manoeuvre. Now, does that cost her in terms of how the First and Deputy First Minister are both perceived by the people of Northern Ireland. Not really. I think Emma's getting out more often with a smile on her face and trying to be positive, and she's maybe recorded a bit of benefit from that in the opinion polls. But I don't think this issue is going to bounce one up and the other down at all.
Okay.
I think it's important, and just to, if you take the John Swinney example, why did he go? If he had gone to Washington and snubbed the president, that's noticed. Once he's going to Washington, he has to meet the president, or else he's going to see those tariffs ramp up against things in Scotland like whisky and the other things that he was there to talk about. And so that's what diplomacy is about. If you snub the person, that is noticed a lot more than if you just turn up. But you don't get a lot of benefit from turning up, but there's a lot of negatives for not going.
Yeah,
and that's why I think it's a mistake.
I agree with that. I think Swinney would be better off knowing the creature that he's dealing with if he offered Trump a couple of rounds of golf with Robert McIntyre, Turnberry or Aberdeen at Trump courses, and brought the Scottish Open to the Trump courses. That would make a bigger impact on Trump than trying to argue that Trump, a non-drinker, should cut the tariff on whisky.
I have to say, Michael, I'm not sure I'd want to offer Bob McIntyre as the person who want to play golf. He's pretty much the grumpiest golfer out there. So there's got to be somebody else.
Moving swiftly on from getting into triggering new golf bores. In terms of actually this, Tim, you were touching upon this. About do people even notice? Because remember, it was a big hoo-ha back here that Michelle O'Neill was going. I think Donald Trump was asked about it, and I think he was like, "Who?"
He didn't even know who she was.
He had no idea.
Probably thought it was Obama.
And the interesting thing is that obviously he's got some very strong views on Nicola Sturgeon. Obviously, when he went to Scotland, he talked about how hopeless he thought Nicola Sturgeon was, and how he thinks John Swinney is doing a good job. I mean, has Emma? I mean, for all the sucking up the DUP have done. Like I saw Jonathan Buckley, I think, having a graphic out this morning welcoming Donald Trump to the UK on a state visit, a picture of him and Donald Trump sitting side. I mean that's cringeworthy, isn't it? I mean,
well, either we think Donald Trump has an ego, and his coterie has an ego that needs to be massaged, or we don't. And I think clearly diplomacy with Trump is being sycophantic. Now, look, Jonathan Buckley putting a picture of him and Trump is not going to shift the dial for economic development in Northern Ireland. But equally, I don't think it does any harm either. Donald Trump likes people to suck up to him, say he's great. This is why he's getting a second state visit, because British diplomacy has figured, look, every state leader wants to come to Britain and get a state visit. That is plumb for everybody who is a head of state anywhere in the world. And for Donald Trump now to have an unprecedented 2 state visits with full trappings, it is just massaging the man's ego, and it's clearly working. So even if you can do a little bit of a mini massage in a Jonathan Buckley type way, it doesn't do any harm.
Jonathan Buckley's intervention's got nothing whatsoever to do with Trump. It's just Jonathan's characteristic way of annoying a few nuts who hate Trump.
And I think there is that, undoubtedly. Look, I think Trump plays a lot better for whatever reason. I mean, we have unionist and nationalist sides and everything, and Trump plays a little bit better on the unionist side of the house than he does on the nationalist Republican side of the house. I mean, that's just a fact. For whatever reason that is, that's the reason. And therefore, Jonathan's playing a little bit to his base, as Michael says, putting in a little bit of a kick. And look, sucking up to Trump doesn't do any harm. It is noticed.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll have to take your word for it there.
But David, you need to get yourself a wee picture of you and Donald, so you don't get it up on your Facebook
Donald
profile.
Trump, really? Yeah, I don't know. You see, I never go to all these things that as I call them, the selfie circuit. Go to the way they go to basically the opening of an envelope and try and suck up to all these. I don't have the fetish. I don't have the West Wing fetish with American politicians that so many people in that circuit seem to have. People who've got fetishes about the West Wing, people who've got fetishes about the Democratic Party, and if there's a Democratic politician or a Republican politician, I just don't. I don't get it. I don't get people who do have that kind of fawning thing over American politicians.
Well, you'll have noticed with the tension that's growing between Ireland and the US over Ireland's position on Israel, etc., and other things, that the powers that be have designated that next year's Irish Open Golf Championship will be played at the Doonbeg Resort of Trump.
Lovely. Well, one thing I was going to say on selfies, and I don't know if Michael will agree with this. The one thing the special advisor that it conditions you to is every time a camera comes out, you jump in the opposite direction, and I find it very hard to get out of that feeling, because even now in my current job, when the camera comes out, I'm jumping out of the way, and people say, "Oh no, you need to get into the picture." And I'm going, I don't need to be in the picture, because I do think with politicians particularly, they have this, you've said fetish, but the politicians want to take a picture with anybody and post that anywhere on social media.
I wasn't referring to politicians. I was referring to people that basically just want to get pictures with American politicians.
But politicians all over the world, this is a thing that they obsess about, getting pictures with people and sticking them on social media. I mean, for me, once I see a camera coming out, I run. That's the special advisor inside me. But unfortunately, that's not the way politicians are. Politicians want to pull out the pictures of them with whoever it is and get that on social media as if we're impressed by it. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, no, it's more some of the hangers-on who run around trying to get pictures. I was referring to.
I do remember the highlight of your life, David, was after the last Assembly election when me and you went to the Duke of York, and someone came up to you and said, "I want to get a picture with you." Oh, you were the wee smile on your face that day.
I was absolutely exhausted from 2 days of coverage. I literally was just about. In fact, I went home early that night. By the way,
and they said to you, David, "I'm sure you can fight your way back into the Man United team."
I'm sure there's a reference there that I just do not get. Okay.
Sorry, the Harry Maguire.
Sorry, I have heard that before. I didn't know he played for Man U. There we go. Right, okay. Moving away from selfies, although it is a little bit linked. I'm sure there'll be a couple of them at the DUP conference this weekend. Party conference season is back. We were talking about it last week, but it officially kicks off this weekend with the DUP meeting in the outskirts of Belfast. This will be Gavin Robinson's second conference as party leader. Now, there are a couple of things that have happened within DUP land this week. So the DUP leader conducted a mini reshuffle of his team. Joanne Bunting is the new junior minister, so she is replacing Pam Cameron, who has left as junior minister. She'll be working alongside Emma Little-Pengelly as deputy first minister. Peter Martin is taking over on an interim basis as chair of the Infrastructure Committee. So Deborah Erskine, his predecessor, is on maternity leave, and hope all that's going well, Deborah. And we also have Paul Frew, who will chair the Justice Committee. He's taken over from Joanne Bunting. So a bit of a promotion for him and a bit of a promotion for Peter Martin. I'm going to go to you first, Tim. Let's start off with the conference itself. What do we need to be talking about on Sunday, on Monday, for Gavin to really have said that this has been a successful conference?
Well, I think the DUP need to show confidence, in themselves, and that needs to, I think, very clearly come out, that there's no wobbles internally, that the party is in a confident state. Whatever the polls are saying, whatever pundits are saying, whatever commentators are saying about the rise of the TUV, that the party itself has a confidence. And I think that they need to, there's really a decision they have to make. What do they do about the protocol? Do they at some point in time face that head on and say, yes, that was a mistake and here's how we're going to fix it? That's maybe not something for this weekend, but that's always going to be bubbling in the background here. Or do they just completely ignore it and just hope for the best? And I think, you've got to take in the round that the rise of the TUV has come because of the strengthening the union deal. People didn't believe the promises that were made. Those, in fact, have turned out to be not true. And the DUP has never formally come out and said, yes, the deal that we did was a bad deal. And the longer it goes on, the more time passes, the more impossible it is to try and roll back from that position. So that's always going to be bubbling behind the surface in terms of the conference this weekend. But I think what they need on Sunday morning is to wake up and say, look, there was a confident party that was presented. There was a confident message that was presented. There was a real sense of delivery for the community that was put forward within the conference. And if they can do that, I think all of these protocol issues they can deal with down the line.
Okay. Michael, are you going to be watching the DP conference this weekend, tuning into Gavin's speech?
Of course. No, I think Gavin's done quite well. He took over. I should say the party conference, an awful lot of whether it's successful or not rests on the shoulders of the leader. That goes without saying, and the leader's main showpiece speech. And I think Gavin Robin has come in and he's stabilised the situation. I mean, he inherited an absolute mess. You had the Sir Geoffrey Donaldson case in the background, and you had people genuinely believing, DUP supporters genuinely believing they've been told a pack of lies about getting rid of the Northern Ireland Protocol and so on. So I think he's stabilised the ship. I think he's popular. I think he's unified the party around himself. So he's in a good position now to kind of project forward and see can he recover some of the ground that had been lost. The difficulty is I'm not sure how he does that. What is the message that gets votes back, largely from TUV? They've still got the Ulster Unionist Party where they want them, but TUV have gained DUP votes. How do they get them back? While looking, as Gavin, I think, would want to, looking like a modern and progressive unionist party. How do they do that? I'm not sure. Then the mini reshuffle, Tim would know more about that than I do, what the motivation was. I can see how Paul Frew might be a more awkward customer for Naomi Long, which as Justice Minister, which might be something dear to Gavin's heart. But I don't really see what Pam Cameron did wrong, other than she was one of very few people who supported Arlen Foster and didn't put the knife in at that time. And Tim would know more about that than me.
Well,
but I think he has to send the troops home with a strong message that we're still moving forward, we're progressive, there's a new era, and we can get those old-fashioned votes back from the TUV.
Yeah, okay, so let's talk about the mini reshuffle. I mean, it is just a mini reshuffle. I don't think we should, we're not trying to overstate it, but again, it is noteworthy. Joanne Bunting, constituency colleague of Gavin Robinson in East Belfast, is the junior minister, and promotions for Paul Frew, who again will be facing off with Naomi Long. And then Peter Martin, who, for anyone who doesn't know who Peter Martin is, he is actually again for the DUP in this assembly mandate. He inherited Alex Easton's old assembly seat, and then, of course, sits with the DUP. Giving them their 26th seat. He's now chair of the Infrastructure Committee. Tim, does it say anything about those particular personalities that they're in those posts, or?
Well, I'll come to that in a second. Just to answer sort of Michael's question of what I think the messaging has to be. I think the DUP have a choice. Do they show that they're the party that could stand up to Sinn Féin and run rings around Sinn Féin and, cause Sinn Féin, hassle in the Assembly? Or do they try to put up a more positive message that they're the party that's going to deliver? I mean, I saw Brian Feeney's piece this week in the Irish News. It was all about, Sinn Féin have a DUP problem, that the DUP are aggressively ramping things up. If Brian thinks that's negative for the DUP, it's not. That's very positive. So does Gavin lean into that? And I think we've seen in the last couple of weeks he has been leaning into that quite a lot. So is that the direction they're going to go down, or is it a more positive delivery line? And that's what I'm going to want to see coming out of the weekend. Which way do they go on that? So, well,
I have noticed now more DUP social media graphics now coming out against Sinn Féin. There's one out today, so we're recording on Wednesday. There's one talking about all the things that the DUP have brought forward this week in the Assembly, and that Sinn Féin have brought forward a debate on bonfire. So kind of this idea. Yeah. And Paul Givan very much leaned into this week about he's here to govern, he's here to make decisions, he's not here to protest. And I don't know whether that line will stick for the DUP, but that was something they've been.
Yeah, I was going to mention Paul Givan. I would bring him front and central into the conference even, because whatever you may think of what he's doing, he's clearly a minister who is doing things. He's quite an action man. So, and I think that's in a positive way. The differentiation with Sinn Féin, that won't stop Sinn Féin, I think that will have diminished in terms of its pull with the electorate, in that the First and Deputy First Minister now have been demonstrated comprehensively to be the same. So winning First Minister and nicking it from is not as big a motivator as it might have been in the past. Sinn Féin have done it, nothing much changed. I don't
think the message is First Minister message. It's who are the people who could stand up to Sinn Féin. So when Sinn Féin try to push back against the unionist agenda, Irish language signs at a train station. Who's the party that can stop them? We're the party that can stop them. TUV can't. When it comes to education and who's the tough person in education who's going to deliver for the people of Northern Ireland, that's Paul Givan. And I think, it doesn't have to be an either or message. And I would worry that they would push a little bit more on the we can stop and annoy Sinn Féin more than we're the party that can actually get round Sinn Féin and deliver for unionists and all that. I think that's the message that it should be. And that's very much the message that Paul Givan has put forward. He can get round the assembly structures. He can get round the roadblocks no other minister can, and can get round to get things delivered for everybody in Northern Ireland. And I think the DUP need to lean into that message. They're the people who have proved over many years that they can circumnavigate any road barrier that Sinn Féin would put in their place, whether that's through the courts, through arguments, through using the assembly structures. They can do it, and no other party can. And that's the message I would want to see them push.
Yeah, I mean, do you think we're going to see, because Jeffrey Donaldson, when he was leading the DUP in 2022, focused very heavily on the border poll message about, put Sinn Féin, you're going to get a debate about a border poll or maybe even a border poll on the horizon. The DUP leaned very heavily on that in 2022. I haven't heard Gavin Robinson. Now, granted, we still have 18 months to go. It could come out around about March time of 2027. I haven't heard much reference of that from the DUP in their pre-election messaging anyway.
I think it would be a mistake for the DUP to lean into that. I think if they start to saber rattle on a border poll, I think that's going to be to their detriment. I think they need to concentrate on we're the party that is competent, we're the party that's confident, we're the party that can get round the traps that Sinn Féin want to set in the way of unionists, and we're the ones that can bridge that gap over how they would like to thwart what unionists want in society. And the TUV don't have the people, they don't have the ability, they don't have the experience that we have, and that's why I agree with Michael. I would certainly make Paul very much a key component on Saturday, and very much make a key component him setting out that philosophy of how he's been able to do it, and that's what the path that the DUP are going to follow. But we'll see if that's where they lean into.
And Michael, in terms of the messaging ahead of the Assembly election, I mean, obviously one of the issues with the border poll side is, actions get reactions, and that, nationalists hear that and think, oh great, well, we'll vote Sinn Féin because, we'll get a border poll because the leader of unionism is saying that.
Yeah, well, the more the DUP and Sinn Féin, spark off each other in public discourse, the more that actually hurts the Ulster Unionists and the SDLP, because they see that they're seen as weak and can't take on the big guys. And that is very difficult. That's a bind that both those parties are in. It's very difficult to see how it changes. But I think over time, now, as you say, there's only 18 months to the election, but over time, more and more voters may take into account what they think is the competence of the government. And not just be kind of like football supporters, and they may look at who the people are who have delivered and who haven't.
Oh, Michael, come on! When has an election in Northern Ireland ever been about that?
Well, it does creep in now and again. You get a surprise result or a blip here and there, and it's because somebody actually did something good.
Well, and not to duck the mini reshuffle as well. Sorry, I said I'd come back to that. Paul Frew is really a
yeah. So for anyone who doesn't know Paul Frew, Paul Frew was briefly the economy minister for 3 weeks. So when Edwin Poots became the leader, he made him. But Jeffrey Donaldson, the only change Jeffrey Donaldson made was sacking Paul Frew, and he put in Gordon Lyons. Paul Frew has again gained kind of traction during the pandemic. Again, he was very critical of lockdowns, very critical of some of the COVID policies, seen as a bit of a maverick DUP MLA, and now he's chair of the Justice Committee. So, Tim, your side.
And well, I think echo some of the stuff that Michael said. Justice has always been important for the DUP. This is where Paul Givan cut his teeth.
That's right.
And he was noticed and got promotion. He did an exceptional job as Justice Minister, and managed to get promotion through that. Look, I think Paul is really a great example of how to do politics from the backbench. He could have come out and been very bitter. He could have come out and been a thorn in the side of the leadership. He could have come out and been desperately negative on Twitter, and he could have been, having whispers in the background. And to the best of my knowledge, he hasn't done that. He has been a good team player on the backbench. Now, you might disagree with some of the things that Paul's doing with his private members' bills and some of the other stuff that he said about COVID. I mean, I would certainly disagree with some of the stances that he's taken, but he is someone who at least is doing something and looking competent. I mean, even if I disagree with a politician, if they at least look like they're having ideas, at least look like they're floating stuff, I mean, I think that, that's what we want to see, and that's what we expect. And I think Paul is someone who has shown that he can be a thorn in the side. And I think in this Justice Committee role, I really hope he takes it and runs with it and shows what he can do, because I think it's a real opportunity for him to show that he is someone who's capable of ministerial office.
He can certainly stand out in the area of putting it up to Naomi Long and the Justice Department, because I heard this week an attempt by John Burrows of the Ulster Unionist Party and said he'd been, pardon the pun, he'd been hounding Naomi Long over the case of a dog that he was concerned about, the dog that was introduced,
the comfort dog,
to a comfort dog, and when the BBC presenter said, "Are you really going to die on a hillside over this? This is your big issue, the management programme for a dog." He said, "This is a touchstone issue. This is big stuff." If that's what the UUP are coming up with, Paul Frewe's going to get a free ride.
Well, I think in fairness, that dog issue is actually, I agree with John on this. That's a much bigger story than what you're giving it credit for. I mean, this is a dog that he's alleging, I don't want to get into this dog issue, to be honest, but it's a dog that he's alleging is being mistreated.
It's barking.
That's well, I actually do think
this segment
John's
of the podcast is sponsored by the USPCA, by the way.
I think that dog has been horrendously badly treated, and I think John has actually sparked into something there, because I think it was actually discussed in Talkback today after 1 o'clock. I didn't hear it. I was in the earlier segments. It was being ushered out of the studio when the dog was being talked about.
I thought you were quite good. I heard it. I thought you were quite good on the pejorative. The pejorative point was good on the AI.
Okay,
this assumption that it's
we're going way off.
negative.
It's not like Edmund Pete's here. We're going way off topic here, but. Anyway,
sorry, David.
But Joanne Bunting coming in as junior minister is actually interesting to me, because I don't know what Pam Frew did that was wrong, or Pam Cameron. Sorry,
you've been all over the place this entire. You called Paul Frew. You called Paul Given the Justice Minister, and now you're.
My head is gone. I think both myself and David are recovering from colds and flu. In our defence today, we should get a pass, but. I don't know what Pam Cameron has done to get that demotion. That's something was a shock to me. I don't know if it's just we need a refresh and Pam's a casualty of that refresh, or if there's something else. I have zero insight into why that is, and I've not heard any rumblings about her. In my view, in my interactions with her as junior minister, it's been amazing. She was amazing. She was a great junior minister. So I don't know if she wants to step back, and that was her choice, or if it was just that, look, we need to make a reshuffle. Pam, you've had a good run at this, and we're bringing Joanne in. I don't know.
And she could have wanted to. That's the other thing. She may have wanted to step down.
But it's been presented, even though Gavin was careful to say that he's got big plans for her in the future within the party. It was a sacking,
Yeah, I mean,
it wasn't a resignation.
I don't know.
Well, who knows? She may have wanted to step back. I mean, and I know that for her, I mean, this maybe she wanted. She really enjoys constituency politics, and was this an instance where she was thinking, look, I haven't really been able to give proper attention to my constituency and an opportunity. I don't know. I've not heard any rumblings against her. I've not heard anything about it being a sacking or anything like that. It is certainly odd. And it's probably right that we note it as odd, but we don't know what the background is.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll be looking at the conference this weekend and seeing how the DUP get on. Now, on to our third topic of the day. Football fans in the Northwest are very disappointed as Derry City, Institute, Coleraine and Limavady United were amongst the clubs not to have received a share of £36.2 million of funding for football. So the Communities Minister, Gordon Lance, whose department administers this fund, says he fully appreciates the concerns that exist in the Northwest, but denied that decisions that he was making had anything to do with geography or his own view. And this provoked a bit of a debate online about the treatment of the Northwest by this executive. So this came in the same week that the First and Deputy First Minister were up announcing an expansion of Seagate, which is a big firm up in Derry. Also, McGee campus had announced pretty healthy numbers in the expansion of student university places up there as well. But then the football funding decision came. And then this week, Kieran Kennedy, who is a former managing director of O'Neill's Sports and the chairman of Strabhan's Business Improvement District, has quit the board of Invest NI 5 years after he first joined in March of 2020. And minutes of the meeting where he quit has him reported as saying that he's lost faith in Invest NI's leadership team after a discussion about the agency's office in Derry. And again, there's been allegations of discrimination in Invest NI against the Northwest region. So we just thought we would talk today about, is Derry getting a raw deal from this executive? Michael, the city of Derry is pivotal and critical to the SDLP's lineage in history. And of course, civil rights and the treatment of Derry. So what's your take on this?
Well, I mean, apart from its storied history, I think Derry's been getting a raw deal, not just from this executive, like 18 months. It's been getting a raw deal for decades. You can go back to the decision to put the university in Coleraine, which didn't work out. It should have gone to Derry. And many other instances where infrastructure even in Derry isn't anywhere near what it ought to be. They still haven't built the A5. They still haven't upgraded the railway. It was the Southern government that ensured that natural gas reached Derry. So there's a long-term problem there around infrastructure. So blaming people short-term is short-termist and inappropriate. Having said all that, people look to Invest NI then, and Kieran Kennedy issue there, and I find it, I mean, it's been reported that the man quit. Final straw was that they wouldn't move the office from being a floor in a building to being a separate own door office. I doubt if that's the reason why someone who's committed themselves and given of themselves for 5 years would walk out over that, but perhaps it was the final straw. Invest NI dispute the numbers. They'll point to investments that have been made that they have supported, but nonetheless the unemployment figures, the wages figures, the multiple deprivation index figures all show that Derry is way behind, and that's a real pity because it's a beautiful place and, in my opinion, has huge potential. It's different from anywhere else, perhaps because of its location near the sea, near Donegal, etc., etc. So, and it's not as though the people are just languishing, complaining about the lack of investment. They have got up off their feet and tried things themselves. I mean, their festivals are legendary. That Halloween thing they do is the biggest celebration in Europe, and that's come from the people themselves. When devolution returned, there was an attempt to regenerate Derry. The RRI, do you remember the ex-military sites at Edmonton and Fort George were gifted over, and they were going to become big economic drivers of the Northwest region in the city. And they set up a separate economic development company, ILEX, which has since disappeared, and everybody had come together for the one big economic development plan, and it just hasn't happened. And the latest sort of manifestation of another initiative is the city growth deal that would pump £300 million if they do all the projects and all these digital and robotic projects and regeneration and tree-lined avenues and riverside boulevards and all the rest of it. I don't know, that was launched and approved and finalised a year ago almost to the day, and I haven't heard much more about it. The other thing is Derry is actually growing a tourism industry. Last time I was up there, I was surprised how many sort of foreign people were there as tourists and so on. So the potential's there, and I think they are entitled to be disgruntled because finally, if Invest and I were looking for, well, we've lots of stakeholders to please and not just the people up in Derry and the Northwest, but the minister's made it clear, and the previous minister made it clear, there are 4 priorities, and 2 of them relate to Derry: good jobs and regional balance. That gives Invest NI and the department the green light to go and help Derry for once.
Okay. Tim?
Well, I think
I mean, so there are 2 issues. So we focused on Invest NI there, but there was also the football funding decision as well. And I know you may have been happy with some of the decisions that were
Well,
made
I
there.
think the people in the area we're talking about would be a lot happier if we used the proper name, of course, Londonderry. But but maybe we need to go all Bill Clinton and say Derry City and Londonderry County or whatever. But look, seriously, the football funding is an interesting one, because I think there's a lot going on there and a lot going on behind the scenes, where I think there are people have rightful gripes on that, and people who are outraged. Some of those people don't have any reason to be outraged. Look, let's strip this right the way back to the start. And there were 5 sporting grounds that were agreed to be done. There was the Ravenhill, there was the National Stadium for football, there was Casement Park, there was the Oval, and there was Derry City's ground as well, was to be redeveloped. Those were the 5 grounds that were agreed to be redeveloped. Now, Ravenhill's been done, the National Stadium's been done, and that's it. The other 3 haven't got the funding that they were promised to redevelop their grounds. That's a problem. That's wrong. Those promises were made. That funding should be released. Those stadiums should be built. Now, that's not the way then the football fund that was announced last week was structured. It was structured entirely differently. That's to do with judicial reviews that took place. That's to do with the lapse of time and how that's developed. And we were left with this fund that is being distributed in an entirely different way. And I think Derry City certainly have a gripe onto that fund that they didn't get the funding they were expecting and that they were promised. But I think other teams in the Northwest, being Institute and Coleraine, I don't think they have gripes, because the criteria was there, the criteria was set, and they didn't meet the criteria, and therefore they didn't get funding. They don't have any gripes in this. So look, I think we can hammer the minister and say the Northwest didn't get money. I think it looks unfortunate that the 3 football clubs in that area didn't get money, but that's where it lies. But I think going back to the start, there were 5 grounds that were promised, and those 5 grounds need to be delivered, and that's the bottom line.
Yeah, but the soccer money and the competition and the criteria then changed, and so there was 39 million or whatever to be given out, and it's happy days for Tim's team, Glendorn, and for Cliftonville at Solitude. But I just looking at the Northwest, I mean, Derry's a big club and ought to be supported. And the case for Institute, I mean, not long ago, Institute were playing in the top flight, Northern Ireland football, and they were, like, it wasn't their fault. Their ground was wiped out by flooding, so they were left without a ground. And I would have thought, well, there's a team that could do with a leg up or a bit of public money to help them out, and they're not getting it. So in addition to Derry City not getting it, it's hard to explain. Now, you said to them that there were criteria that had to be met and the whole process is transparent. And I don't believe the minister's up to any skullduggery here at all, but I'd love to see a wee bit more transparency around this, to see just how it was figured out.
Mm-hmm.
I'm happy to say that Glenavon and Lurgan are going to get a few quid out of it. And the growing Oxford Sunnyside team in Lurgan is also going to get a touch. So that's all good. But the Northwest miss out again.
I was about to say, but before we send our Northwest listeners' blood pressure up any higher, as you two laud your teams east of the ban, or maybe you're not east of the ban, Michael, teams. But what about then the overall general premise about Derry, Tim? There is that perception, and maybe it's more than a perception, that on these key critical projects, whether it's from football to other things, the Northwest, not just the city of Derry, but the Northwest region, so that's taken in places like Limavady and all, that they are just consistently being left behind, and they're not being they're not being given the treatment and the attention they deserve.
Well, like, I mean, this is a gripe that's the world over. I mean, if you go to Manchester, Newcastle, Carlisle, and you say, do you think you're getting the funding you deserve from the UK government? They say London gets everything and we get nothing. This is the same the world over. There's nowhere in the world where there's not big population centres that get all of the funding, get all of the facilities, get all of the inward investment, and that they're thriving. And then there are areas outside of that feel they're getting a raw deal. So what we're seeing from the Northwest is exactly what we see in every other country in the world. Now, you cannot force. Whenever I was in Delhi and we were dealing with Invest NI, people would be coming over from America for investment. You cannot force companies to go to the Northwest. Invest and I would very clearly bring companies to sites, say, here's a factory, here's this, here's that, we can do this, that, and the other for you. They would go to sites in the greater Belfast area as well, and they say, no, we want to be here because that's better for us. That's better for us to invest in. You can't force that company to go to where they do not want to go.
I think that's right. Most companies that invest in Northern Ireland will want to be somewhere near that sort of Belfast-Dublin corridor, or be near the port or whatever, the airport, whatever. But some things have changed. One, as I said before, the Minister's policy is unambiguous. Regional balance. You must strive for it. It's your job to target it. But secondly, there's a whole range of follow-ons from the change in the nature of work post-COVID and hybrid working and all the rest of it, that Northern Ireland hasn't been successful and is unlikely to be successful in attracting major manufacturing employment, big factories and all. I think that's almost a thing of the past. But it has been successful, and Invest NI have been successful in drawing in back office services, legal services, that kind of thing, which can be as easily done in Belfast as it can in London. Well, if it can be done as easily in Belfast as London, it can be done as easily in Derry as it can in London. So why are they not shipping up these groups of lawyers? There's plenty of lawyers in Derry, plenty of people capable of doing this back office work, and they're not getting in much of it. And the expansion of McGee is long-term probably a good way of ensuring that Derry does have a big pool of skilled labour that can take on these investments. Yeah. But with the changing nature of work, Invest NI, with the ministerial direction, has no excuse for not bringing more employment to Derry, which it desperately needs.
Yeah, and there were positive announcements around Seagate and around McGee that has been, this is the first year of the kind of expansion of McGee kind of coming in for students this term, and I'll declare an interest. I do.
And for students of
I
history,
teach at Ulster University. I don't teach in McGee though. But that hopefully is the start of kind of building up that campus and that part of it.
For students of history, McGee College was, of course, financed by a lady from Lurgan who paid for the entire thing, Martha McGee, and you find a blue plaque in her honour at the front facade of McGee College. Okay,
well, there we go. That's brilliant.
There we must leave it,
and there we must. And we'll just end it there. We can't really take it. We can't really take it much further than that. Okay, just to remember, you can comment on anything you're hearing. Lots of you are. Which is great. We've got a whole bunch of messages for us to get through. You really did respond very well to the Ask Us Anything segment last week, so we're really appreciative of that. You can drop us a WhatsApp, 0333 404 6507. Remember to use the word Stormont. You can also drop us an email, hello@stormontsources.com. Thank you very much for listening to this edition of Stormont Sources. That's all from Tim, Michael and myself. We'll see you next week.